Zohran Mamdani has now faced criticism in India over his handwritten note to activist Umar Khalid. Remember, Khalid has been in jail for over 5 years in the 2020 Delhi riots case. Riots that killed 53 people back then. Khalid, of course, is charged under UAPA in cases linked to rioting and violence. Now, Mamdani's letter to Khalid has been shared by his partner on X. It mentions bitterness and the importance of not letting it consume the entire person. Perhaps Mamdani was also referring to his own struggles with the US President Donald Trump. Interestingly, it arrives after Khalid's father, Syed Qasim Rasool Ilyas, met Mamdani in the US last month itself. But that's not all. A group of American lawmakers have also written to India's ambassador, to the United States ambassador, Vinay Quatra. They demand a bail for Khalid and a fair, timely trial in accordance with international law. Now, the letter by the US lawmakers also states that as the world's largest democracies, both India and the United States have an interest in protecting and upholding freedom, the rule of law, human rights, and pluralism. Ironically, both Mamdani and the 8 US lawmakers have conveniently turned a blind eye to human rights violations on their own soil. Whether it's the case of African-American George Floyd, who was killed in police custody, the attacks on temples or minorities in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, neither Mamdani nor the US lawmakers have uttered a word against such hate crimes. Don't forget, the Indian Americans who've been killed in the US, 4 of them alone, we can quote, in 2025 alone. The United States, which has a long history of human rights violations and democratic shortcomings, what's even more hypocritical is that the US itself is involved in numerous military interventions in countries like Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Syria, much of it leading to significant civilian casualties and destabilization. Talk about human rights violations and democratic shortcomings. The US imprisoned journalists like Julian Assange for long periods simply for exposing truths, demonstrating a blatant disregard for press freedom. So what right does the United States have to intervene on the incarceration of Umar Khalid? This when the matter is already under consideration before India's Supreme Court. Is this not disregard for India's democratic institutions, that too by a key strategic ally, the United States?
भारत जो पूरी दुनिया में ह्यूमन राइट्स का चैंपियन होता था, आज अमेरिकी सीनेटर्स और न्यूयॉर्क के मेयर को भारत को आईना दिखाना पड़ रहा है, भारत को के बारे में लिखना पड़ रहा है कि आपके यहाँ ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशन हो रहा है.
Whether it's Mamdani or someone else, they should be aware that Indian judicial system is robust and is known worldwide for its judicial process. And he should also be aware that all that happened when Donald Trump, then the president of America, was on visit to India. Judiciary is already has taken cognizance of that, and no one should raise question on our judiciary.
All right, let me introduce my esteemed guests today. I'm joined in by Professor Andrew A. Latham, who's an international relation expert. Also joined in by Mr. Vikram Singh, who's a former IPS officer. Akhil Swami, a political analyst, continues to stay with us. I'm being told Mr. Tushar Gupta, who's a renowned journalist, will also be joining in just a bit. But Andrew, if I could come to you first, just to quote what the US lawmakers have verbatim said, that their concern is regarding the prolonged pre-trial detention of individuals charged in connection with the February 2020 violence in Delhi. That includes Khalid. So what's also concerning is that they're not just referring to Umar Khalid, they are the others also. What gives the US lawmakers the right to, in fact, talk about this pre-trial detention, which is very much a matter under the Supreme Court's attention right now?
It's a very good question. Legally, of course, they have no standing whatsoever, and diplomatically, they would be well advised to not interfere in the internal affairs of another country. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world that in which politics, at least for these lawmakers, reign supreme, and they are signaling to their constituencies, their base, as it were, making all kinds of claims that are not legal, they're moral. This, for them, is a morality play. intersecting with a partisan political play. The short answer to the question is no legal standing whatsoever. Diplomatically, given the importance of India to the United States in the Indo-Pacific and recent turbulence in the relationship, they'd be well advised, if they were acting on behalf of the United States, to be quiet. But they're not acting on behalf of the United States. They're acting on behalf of their own political fortunes.
Quickly bringing in Vikram Singh also on that note. I can see Tushar Gupta has also joined in. Mr. Singh, remember the Delhi police has claimed that there was a larger play over here. The entire riot was meant to, in fact, bring in a regime change. There was rioting. They also said that there were external forces at play. Those who organized these riots were also against the CAA. Can you take us through how grave were these riots that took place? Remember, the fact of the matter remains 53 lives were lost.
Very much. Good evening, esteemed panelists and Akanksha ji. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the anti-CAA riots saw the input of 120 crores of rupees. And to the first posture, I would say that let him cast the first stone who has not sinned before. The Delhi riots, you may recall, also had those who had paid their homes into a personal armories. They had petrol bombs, Molotov cocktails, and also a mixture of sand and also red chili powder to throw on the police. The manner in which they attacked the Delhi police, women and policemen, well, it was such a shame and a scandal. And I would compliment the Delhi police for being so tolerant and did not use any disproportionate force at all. Now to your second question, that the Delhi riots were an insidious planning. There was funding, flash mobs, and Umar Khalid was very well up to the mark. I will also tell you, because we go into the family pedigree also. Umar Khalid's father has been a known activist of the Student Islamic Movement of India, and after having served the CME for a long time, he became an Ansar. An Ansar would be a veteran of the CME. Therefore, it seems to be that he seems to be a die-hard person who would like, perhaps, I would say, to into Ghazwai Hind, create an Islamic state in 2047 and make India an Islamic country. The riot in itself would go to show the planning, the execution, and also to target the police and also those. And a policeman was murdered by the corporator, Tahir Hussain, who was stabbed to death and his body was found in the gutter. Therefore, the riots were planned, they were timing, and also the manner and the insidious manner in which they had the anti-CAA agitations also. I would blame Umar Khalid singly. They were agitations, and the matter is in the cognizance of the Honorable Supreme Court. And for the USA, I would say you are far too young. Go back to 68, the My Lai massacre, in which the 20th Infantry Battalion murdered 500 people in cold blood, mutilated bodies, and committed gang rape. And then you have what is known as the shame GTMU, Guantanamo Bay Detention Centers, which has 720 detainees. And no trial and nothing, because it has very, very systematically planned to be on the side of Cuba. Therefore, the Americans' laws do not operate there. And they have what is known as enhanced interrogation techniques. So America has, in fact, structured and institutionalized third degree and brutality and name it enhanced interrogation techniques. Well, it is certainly not for US to tutor us on human rights, because they have a black record. And I would take them back to Black Lives Matter. And also the other agitations which you rightly mentioned. Therefore, I would say that they would be well advised to set their own house in order before they lecture us.
Akhil Swami, quickly want to bring you in on the political chatter surrounding the concerns that have been raised by US lawmakers. Today, BJP's Pradeep Bhandari, in fact, has raised how Rahul Gandhi had that meeting with Jan Schakowsky. And soon after that meeting today, she also happens to be one of the lawmakers who've raised the issue of Omar Khalid and written to the Indian government. They shockingly, this is what they have to say, that Khalid has been detained without bail for 5 years for charges under the UAPA, which independent human rights experts have warned may contravene international standards of equality. So they are more concerned about what human rights experts are saying about contradicting international standards of equality, but utter disregard for what the Supreme Court's own observations, even the High Court's own observations have been so far.
See, if you have all respect for the Supreme Court and High Court of India, then you should also have respect for the Bangladeshi courts, which have declared Sheikh Hasina as a culprit and accused
Mr.
and a
Swami,
criminal.
we are talking about Omar Khalid. When I was
Khalid,
discussing Bangladesh, you started discussing
there is
Mamdani. Now when I am discussing Omar Khalid, you are discussing Sheikh Hasina. Why is there this digression?
Om Prakash Dhakad is given bail in 24 hours. Braj Bhushan Sharan Singh, accused of POSCO Act, where the arrest
My
should have
question
been
is
made
very
immediately.
basic. What gives the
Omar
US
Khalid should get
lawmakers
bail.
or Mr. Mamdani
Whatever
to turn
Mamdani
a
is
blind
saying is
eye
right.
to all
Omar
of
Khalid
those
should get bail.
human rights
Omar
violations
Khalid should
taking
get
place
bail.
against
It
Indian
is
Americans on
injustice
their
to
own
Omar
soil?
Khalid. The basic point is that a summon is issued by the government, the courts of America, and the summons are not served in India for last 1 year. Is it fair? So Omar Khalid, just because he is a Muslim, would you punish him? So the basic point is Om Prakash Dhakal gets bail in 24 hours. Braj Bhushan Sharan Singh is not arrested. Vijay, the singer gets bail by the High Court, and the Supreme Court has to intervene.
Fair enough.
And
Go
Omar
to,
Khalid
go
doesn't get
to
a
the
hearing
courts
for 5
in
years.
your country. Tushar Gupta, I think you should weigh in on that. Why do we need US lawmakers or say a newly elected New York mayor who has his own, concerns of cost of living crisis, racism, all of them is currently not being addressed, but there's a letter being penned for Omar Khalid, a matter which is currently sub judice. Tushar Gupta.
Good evening, Akanksha. You know, running a Bollywood-style campaign, Zohran Mamdani is actually confusing himself for a Bollywood hero. He is the New York mayor, and the New York mayor has the executive oversight of the New York Police Department. Now, my simple question, or any rational man or woman would ask this question to Mamdani, would he be okay with people blocking the streets of New York? Would he be okay with the economics of New York being interfered by hooligans and arsonists? Would he be okay if the function of the New York Police Department is put under threat by a group of people who want to create deadlocks, who want to create chakka jumps within the city in the name of freedom of speech and expression? I'm sure he won't agree to it. But because he's sitting in the US, he believes it's his moral responsibility to lecture what happens in the other parts of the world. I understand where he derives this, mentality from. It's coming from the White House. One can understand that. But this has to do with an improper reading of the affairs in India. Umar Khalid is in jail not because he's a Muslim, not because he's a college-going student, not because he exercised his freedom of speech and expression. He's in jail because the Delhi police has clearly stated that he was a part of a larger conspiracy to create a deadlock within the city of Delhi, to get the law and order completely collapsed, to have a situation where everything would have gone out of control. He was going for chaos. Now, if Mamdani endorses that kind of a model for New York, by all means, he can think about Umar Khalid. But is this about just Umar Khalid? Is this a religious angle to it? Is this a global lobby supporting Umar Khalid? All these questions must be asked. But at the end of the day, I only want to leave Mamdani and his supporters with one question. If what was being done in December 2019 in Delhi is attempted in New York today, you'll see what happens there, not even in 24 hours, in the next 30 minutes. That is the difference between US and India.
Andrew Latham, if I could bring you in on that aspect of Mamdani and his selective sort of outrage over here, because we've seen that he's also born out of an Indian mother. I can tell you in March 2025, last year, there was a father-daughter duo which was killed. They were shot dead at a departmental store in Virginia. 56-year-old father named Pradeep Patel, 24-year-old daughter Urmi. In September last year, 50-year-old Indian man named Chandramouli Nagamalaya was brutally beheaded in front of his own wife. That very month, a 26-year-old man, Kapil, from India's Haryana, was shot dead in California. In October, 28-year-old student from Hyderabad was shot dead in Texas. Not even a word has come from the newly elected mayor of New York.
No, that's absolutely right. This is very much he's written and is acting in a morality play. He has a script, which is a script that poor Muslims in America are so hard done by, and around the world by extension. That's part of his electoral base. That's part of his appeal to the progressive side of the Democratic Party in the United States. He has taken the opportunity to play the role, as was pointed out a little bit earlier, of hero in this particular drama, even though he clearly doesn't understand what's going on in India. It's difficult enough to govern a complex city like New York City. That should be a full-time job, and he should be devoting 100% of his time, energy, and everything else towards being the best mayor he can possibly be, not grandstanding on a global stage and commenting about the internal affairs of another country about which he knows little and I suspect cares less. But that's where we are in the United States. It's true
I think grandstanding is in fact the right word. Vikram Singh, would you in fact agree with what Andrew is also highlighting? Because over here we've seen what Mamdani has done. He's in fact been drawing comparisons with how he stood up against a bully like the US President Donald Trump. And so he's also referred to that mildly in his letter which he penned for Umar Khalid. But talk about the anti-India forces at play over here. There's a lot of politicization that's taking place and selective vocal outrage.
Words of profound wisdom from Professor Andrews, and I compliment him for that. And yes, diplomacy is not my strength, but I would say belonging to a particular community does not give any immunity to commit crime and be absolved about that. Or the state should soft pedal because a person belongs to a particular community. That cannot happen. Again, to your comparison between what Mamdani is doing vis-a-vis Trump and what he's dictating, and I feel I'm oblivious to Indian laws and conditions, comparison should be between comparables. He is living in an Alice in Wonderland world, and therefore, as Professor Andrew has mentioned, he has an electoral base and he's nursing that. And in the process, perhaps he crosses the line, does not care two who's as to what he is doing and whether it is proper, improper, discreet or indiscreet. To the contrary, I feel that voting and writing a handwritten note for a person who's accused of the most horrific crime within the ambit of law, the Supreme Court is privy to the fact, and yet he chooses to be on the other side of law. Well, I wish him well. What more can I say?
Akhil Swami, weigh in on the word that's coming from the BJP. In fact, spokesperson Pradeep Bhandari saying that it was only after Janice Chakravarty's meeting with Rahul Gandhi we've seen a lot of anti-India rhetoric being drummed up within these US lawmakers. That also includes, say, the likes of Ilhan Omar. And today, in fact, Chakravarty is one of them who've penned a letter to the Indian government asking for Omar to be released.
Umar Khalid is accused or he is a declared culprit and the criminal by the courts. See, 5 years. Why don't you hear the case? Why the charge sheet is not filed? Why don't you discuss and the court decide that he's a criminal and hang him? No problems. But you are putting this case for 5 years. You are not giving a fair trial. And you are right here. There is a media trial and he is being declared accused and the punishment is given to him for 5 years. 5 years. Om Prakash Dhakar gets bail in 24 hours. Mr. Brajbhushan Sharan Singh is not arrested. And Mr. Sengar, who kills 5 or 6 persons of a particular family, is granted bail by the High Court. Umar Khalid, just because, and Mamdani has a bitter experience about 2002 riots. Okay. So he is referring to that riots because that is in his back of his mind.
So, Tushar Gupta, many have in fact raised this question time and again from the other side of the political spectrum, whether it is Umar Khalid, Gulfisha Fatima or even Sharjeel Imam, that they have been jailed in the Delhi riots conspiracy case since 2020 and on fabricated charges. Why shouldn't they be given the right to bail?
Were the Delhi riots a fiction? Fiction? The people who died in Delhi riots, was that fiction? When people call these charges fabricated, I don't understand. Do they think these are characters from the Harry Potter world we've just imported and put them inside prison? Do they think this is a video game going on? Akhil Swami very irresponsibly says these are fabricated charges. The charge sheet, one should go through the charge sheet. What was going on in West Delhi, on the border of Ghaziabad in Delhi?
I'll give you time. Akhil Swami, I'll give you time to come up with the counter. Let Tushar finish.
No. If Mamdani thinks that these charges are fabricated, I just want to ask him and his supporters, do they also think 9/11 was fiction? Do they think that the planes that flew into the World Trade Towers were fiction? It's very easy to dismiss that whatever happened in Delhi was somehow fabricated, the protests were fabricated. I remember you were covering Shaheen Bagh, Akanksha, and we used to listen to death calls against the Prime Minister and Home Minister back then. Was that fiction? Everything was captured on television. Every single piece of literature was circulated on social media, and it was only because of the pandemic that they stopped. But they had grander plans, one of which was the Delhi riots, and they accomplished it. Is that all fiction? Are we going to pretend that none of it happened? If all of it indeed happened, as was captured on television, as the records show, how are the charges fabricated? And if the charges are indeed fabricated, are they saying the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary and the media, the four pillars of democracy, are working against the poor Umar Khalid? What nonsense!
Fair enough. Akhil Swami, there's one right to peacefully protest, but we all know that these were inorganic protests meant to foment violence, meant to manufacture a regime change. What explains the death of these 53 people who died? Also, not to forget, the trial court, the High Court, both have rejected their bail pleas.
See, the basic point is that I never said that the cases are fabricated. But why don't you start the trial, give him a trial, fair trial, try and decide the case within 6 months, hang him if he is culprit, and he did all that, and free him if he has not. So the basic point is that you are releasing the killers because they belong to a particular community, and a particular community, the person, all the accused, if they belong to a particular society or a particular religion, then fair trial, and every religion should be dealt fairly. And we have all faith on the Supreme Court of India and the High Courts of India. Let them try. If he is culprit, if he has done something wrong, he should be punished. But if he is not, he should be released on bail. Why 5 years time has been taken by the various courts and the bail is not granted to him? That is the basic question.
Mr. Singh, how would you weigh in on the point that Akhil Swami has just now raised? Because remember, there were larger forces at play over here. The ones who were looking towards change of regime were also political in nature. The ones who were very much protesting the CAA. And as Akhil Swami is saying that, are we looking at just targeting of a particular community? How do you respond to that?
Absolutely not. Mr. Akhil Swami is a very learned panelist, and I respect him for that. But the fact of the matter is that I would say there is something known as preventive detention. When a case like riot is investigated, there are voluminous things. And I'm given to understand that then Police Commissioner S.N. Srivastava, in fact, in his press conference, there are thousands of pages pertaining to the charge sheet. In fact, more than 3 PhD theses rolled into one. Therefore, to compile that, to prepare the charge sheet, to put up before the court, and there's a backlog. How could you feel that we should allow anybody, merely because it belongs to a particular community, to jump the queue? Anybody and anybody, unless he is put into a fast-track court, which is a decision that has to be taken by the government, not by the police commissioner, not by society, or by the court itself. And there have been cases where people belonging to a particular country, and I take the strongest exception to that the Supreme Court was opened midnight for them so that they could get a faster hearing. They have the best legal brains. They fly to USA, and they fly to USA and have the support of no other than Mayor Mamdani. Well, what more do you think that with the deep pockets they could have indeed have the Supreme Court open? But that wasn't happened. National security is paramount.
I want to give quick closing thoughts to Andrew Latham. Andrew Latham, whether Mamdani's own letter or the letter that is being penned by the US lawmakers, do you think that this has again unmasked US hypocrisy? We are not just talking about targeted killings of Indian Americans. You look at the Black Lives Matter movement, which began because there was a killing of George Floyd. It was a clear-cut case of racism. You're looking at the way regime changes are being manufactured by the United States, the kind of instability the world over we are witnessing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure I would characterize all of those things the way you just did, but I would agree very, very broadly that this House needs to be put in order, and we elect people at the municipal level, at the state level, at the national level, to put our house in order. Once upon a time, American lawmakers thought, in the aftermath of the Cold War, that they ran the world. Those days are over. They were never there in the first place, but they're certainly over now. And time, energy, and money ought to be devoted to getting the American house in order and not pontificating about what's going on in other people's houses. I'm fairly knowledgeable about Indian politics, and I wouldn't presume to weigh in on the particulars of this case.
All right.
And nor should the mayor of New York City.
Thank you so much for, in fact, coming up with that perfect conclusion. I just want to, in fact, conclude with Mr. Raju's remarks that when intellectuals become terrorists, they can prove to be more dangerous than the ones on the ground. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. And that's